hopefully you've had a chance to try this problem on your own. This is similar to what we did before. We looked at these two molecules already, but we looked at them in a neutralization reaction. Now we're going to break them apart and add them each to water separately and look at the dissociation reactions. So, building off of what we did before, we already recognize that this is our acid and this nitrogen molecule is our base. So, when I add this acid to water, the water will act as the base. It'll always act as the opposite. And so, in my lower one, when I'm adding a base to it, that water is going to act as an acid. And so to predict my products, I am going to make sure my acid donates a hydrogen to my base in both cases. Um, so for this first one, and I don't have the name for it because it's extremely long, but it's a carboxylic acid, so it's an organic acid, is going to donate that hydrogen that's bonded to an oxygen. And so I'm going to rewrite this by just dropping that hydrogen at the end, similar to what I did in the neutralization reaction. It's going to have a negative charge because it was neutral, and I just removed a proton and left behind its lone pair, or sorry, its electron. So that'll be my conjugate base. And then I'll add to that the water molecule plus a hydrogen. So instead of H2O, it's H3O. And it was neutral before I added this proton to it, so it'll have an overall plus charge at the end. And this is my conjugate acid. And so I have this conjugate acid base, or sorry, this base conjugate acid pair and this acid conjugate base pair. All right, so now looking at this other one, my water this time is going to actually act as the acid. And so one of these hydrogens is going to come over and form a bond to the lone pair on the nitrogen. So when I'm rewriting this, I'm just going to add an extra hydrogen to that nitrogen compound and subtract one from the water when I write out my products. So that base is going to form its conjugate acid pair by adding an extra hydrogen. And I do that by changing my subscript from nothing to 2. And then I still have my CH2, CH3, 2. And it gains a positive charge because it was neutral, gained a proton, now it has an overall positive charge. And so since this is the product of my base, this is my conjugate acid. Then the water lost that hydrogen, so I'm going to write it subtracting it so that H2O becomes H1O or just HO, or you can write OH. It's your preference. And since it was neutral and lost that proton, it'll have a negative charge. So that acid forms a conjugate base.